Yo, 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 what is going on, COD Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder. Man, it's been a minute. And I also wanted to say that for those of you who might have checked out my last video, I opted to just take it down. I wanted just to make a brief statement. You know, I think it's really important that when we're putting out content, the quality of that content should never be sacrificed, right? It should always be at the highest that we should be able to put it out on. And that comes from the research that we do, the information that we talk about. And though I thankfully have maybe only ever done that one other time thus far while I've been doing COD, and it was a lot earlier than I did that one, it is important to me that I am upholding that. And given that I did end up recording it late, which still is no excuse, I wanted to at least give a disclaimer, if you will, for anyone who was wondering, and to also hopefully show the importance of the quality of content that I'm putting out and the reasons why I would take something down like that. So, moving on, let's get into this video today, which is going to be about kingdoms and whether or not you should be staying or leaving the kingdom that you're in right now. So I'm going to talk about trends, I'm going to talk about signs, some red flags, good indicators, and overall kingdom health and how kingdoms can develop in multiple different ways, and things really just for you to look out for. So we're going to start with, what do I think are some red flags, right? What are things that, and bear in mind, I have to preface this by saying it also depends on what you want and what you as an individual are trying to get out of the kingdom and or trying to get out of your playing experience. So we're going to tie those in as well. So let's start off with a few variations / versions on how a kingdom can develop that could impact you as a player that you need to watch out for. Okay. Let's start with the first example, which is usually the easiest, right? If a kingdom in your starting zone 1, because remember, zone 1 is where everyone is in the kingdom, right? That's where all the players are going to start out in, and then zone 2, it just condenses, right, as you go on. So, if you are noticing, right, we'll talk about the One Alliance region. If you are noticing that your region is gravitating more towards a One Alliance this majority control approach, where you're seeing, as an example, that One Alliance is just going out and grabbing as many behemoths as they can. They are extending out to multiple level 2 passes. It just seems as though they are, or even if they're doing something like this, their alliance is up here and they're just going across like this, right? And they're just blocking off the level 2 passes. Any of these types of indicators that you see from either an earlier kind of midpoint before zone 2 opens with those level 2 passes, to me, that indicates a red flag. Why? Because this alliance most likely just wants to control the region. They don't want to let anyone go farther. They're trying to grab as many behemoths as they can. And most likely, they're probably going to take a kind of a join or die approach, or join / be alienated and be alienated approach, right? Where you'll kind of just be left to your own whimsical dealings. Again, the challenge here is that can unfortunately dissuade people from just not liking that approach and not wanting to join and go to other regions, which it could also cause players to just not play anymore, right? That can be a turnoff for some people, especially if they see that. Maybe some people might want to join that alliance, but if the alliance is full and they just don't have any way to increase any additional member capacity, that can also hinder just kind of organic growth within the region. Then let's get to variation 2, right? Variation 2, and I also want to point out that if you see an alliance doing this, the likelihood is that when they go to zone 2, there's nothing stopping them from doing the same thing, right? They could just go ahead and take over zone 2, and they might have the same approach going into zone 3, which could lead you down this path of, well, they're probably going to fight it out with some other alliances who just aren't going to step down, and then you could have a chance of something like that leading to a civil war, or at least a war amongst the big guys, which probably in those cases really wouldn't extend to a zone 1 unless they were really playing more bully ball. Then let's get to number 2. Number 2 is a variation of a single alliance approach, with the exception of that they just want to kill everyone. They just don't want anyone, right? Maybe the first approach is they're okay with other alliances surviving, but the second approach is more of we're just going to attack and remove all the CFs in the Zone 1 region because we just don't want any possible challenges. Or maybe they'll just go after the other stronger alliances in the region just so there's less likely of a chance of any type of resistance or rebuttal or counterplay, right? Or even just them running into a challenge in the future where maybe that alliance could become stronger than them, and then they're in a less favorable situation themselves, right? So they're kind of more the aggressive bully, if you will. Number 3, maybe the region you're in is developing, this is kind of the next red flag, right? Is maybe the region you're developing in is there's just a lot of drama. Maybe there's a lot of politics. Maybe even if the alliance, even if they're the strongest alliance in the region, maybe you're noticing they're reaching out to a lot of people and they're instigating fights or instigating wars, right? They're trying to get alliances to attack each other. Maybe they're making false promises, or maybe they're making hopeful promises to alliances out there, and they're just playing more of the Diplo game. That, to me, is a big red flag, because you just don't know what you're going to expect. You don't know if you're going to get jokers. You don't know if you're going to get two faces, one side of the face or the other side of the face. And so be very cautious of that. And if you notice that, remember, to me, integrity is everything. If you don't know someone, all you can go off of is their word and their actions, right? Not just their word alone, and not necessarily, even you could argue, right, the actions speak louder than words, but I kind of like to believe that they're somewhat tied together. Unless there literally are no words, meaning that you don't communicate with anyone at all, that's a different story. So that would be number 3 for me on my red flag list. I think another one that I have seen often that I would say is another red flag is if you are noticing that a lot of the top players are joining one alliance, meaning that they don't mind using Resurgence to move regions. If you have one alliance that is basically recruiting or trying to recruit a lot of the top players, this is something that you may notice if you've seen some of my content on SS1-2, right? When that war was happening, they're in Season 3 right now, at least as of recording this video. And that's kind of the approach that they attempted to take. And they ended up getting a lot of people within the top 200 on the player list. About, I think, 66%, 2/3 of the people when we had last covered it before the war started. And so, or I should say before that season started by the time they got in. And so that's kind of what we refer to as the mega alliance approach, right? That's where you just want to hoard the best of the best players and you put them into a single alliance, and then it's kind of, you know, more or less, I don't want to say power rules all, but it's kind of this Darwinism, right? It's the survival of the fittest type approach. And that to me is also a red flag, because one of the things I like to say is, once you've drank the Kool-Aid, right, it's very hard to go back, right? Once you start, getting a taste of what it is on that side, you're kind of getting that the drunken power type approach, right? Spider-Man when he goes dark, if you will. Those are things that to me are red flags. Because if you're an alliance and you're the strongest and it's not even close from where number 2 is, and then even more so once you go down the leaderboard, you can do whatever you want. You can take whatever you want. You can demand whatever you want, and you could probably go and burn whomever you want. And this is why it's difficult to have somewhat of a humbling approach. And usually what I see on average is no, we're going to take this. It's already decided. We're taking Dragon before it even gets anywhere. We're going to have a few of these other behemoths that are in other zones. Now, don't get me wrong. If there is a humble approach to that, that's lovely. That's fantastic. It's just more often than not, I don't typically see that approach when you have a mega alliance type structure that is being built in a kingdom. And this typically is done because the kingdom is devoid of any type of initial infrastructure that has been established from the beginning. This typically is something that you would usually see being done in most part by groups, projects that are going into kingdoms. Very similar, and I'll give an example for how we do it in 65, right? So I'll give an example later when we talk about good flags to look at, right? Things that I think are just good approaches. And it doesn't just mean the one I'm going to give you an example of. We'll give you a couple. But that would be another red flag for me. I think another one is even if it's a 2 alliance ran server, I still think that's a red flag. I think that's less of a red flag than if it's just a one alliance server being ran. But I still think that is a good or a healthy, which is probably kind of counterintuitive to the point I'm making. But again, it's still a decent red flag in that case. Because you also have to think about, not only are you running a 1 to 2 alliance kingdom, but you're alienating all of the other alliances and or all the other players who may not be able to make it into Zone 3, just depending on your approach. And who knows if those people would even allow them in Zone 2, right? I think that's a little more likely, but Zone 3 sometimes can be difficult when you're running those types, because you're, in your mind, I held this one in, there we go. In your mind, right, in their mind, I should say, you're thinking, well, if I don't allow anyone in Zone 3, I can get all the villages, I can get all the best territory for flagging, I can go ahead and have access to multiple behemoths, which is going to increase my member capacity. And in their mind, they're like, oh, well, if I just increase my member capacity, I'll be able to bring in the people from Zone 2 and Zone 1. Like, it's just such a, I don't want to say a twisted way of thinking, but it's not the most ideal approach, right? When you're thinking about the psychology behind why players play and what they're looking forward to. And I think it's one of the reasons why there's such high turnover in kingdoms, and that factors into the amount of new kingdoms that are coming out, right? See, some people might look at it and say, oh, well, so there's so many new kingdoms that are coming out, this is great. On one hand, it is great that a lot of new kingdoms are coming out, because it allows for a lot of the new players to get in. However, the challenge really is that the other side of it, kind of the dark side, the unseen side, is that there's always going to be quite a lot, or however many that may be, of players that will restart because of the experiences that they've had starting out or playing in a kingdom that they're in, right? And this doesn't mean that every kingdom is going to be ran graciously, fantastically, in a way that is going to allow for the most amount of players to stay active and the most amount of players to be retained in a kingdom through a sustainable period, not just in the beginning, right? For me, and now we'll kind of get, and again, those are just some of the red flags. Let's get to some of the good things, right? Good signs that your kingdom, I believe, right? Remember, we're operating under the premise of you are trying to keep the kingdom as healthy as possible, right? Meaning that you're trying to keep the most amount of active players in the kingdom and the most amount of those active players retained for as long as you possibly can, right? Because it allows for as many other real human beings that they are to keep playing the game and enjoying it, where they don't feel like they're being ostracized or alienated or isolated in some type of way because of how that kingdom is developing. Remember, every player wants to be able to fulfill I don't want to say fulfilling, gosh, that's such a non-word, it feels like, right? They want to have a fulfilled experience. They want to feel as though they are able to play out a Zone 1 all the way, play a Zone 2 out all the way, play a Zone 3 out all the way. Now, we all know that there are finite resources, finite space, so it doesn't mean that this is always going to be something that's achievable. That has to be understood, right? There could be and may be players and or alliances that just may not be able to make it into a deeper zone, and it does just depend, right? There's variations there. So let's get into what I think some of the good things are now. So if you are in a kingdom, and I'm just going to kind of start off on the highest end of this, and then we'll kind of backtrack to meet it in the middle. So, and I'll use Kingdom 65 as our first example. One of the approaches I have that operates under what that kind of mantra is, right, our mission statement, if you will, with keeping as many players active as many of them retained, is our approach when we came into Kingdom 65. We had 9 alliances, over 360 confirmed players, and that's more of a soft number. I do believe it's a little bit closer to 400. We basically put alliances in every single region. We had 2 that we put in Forgotten Lands, 2 that we put in Nivola, for specific reasons. But we had reach in each of the regions. The approach was, we're not going to sit here and take everything. Any of the leads that are in my project, you can reach out, even officers, they'll tell you the same thing, right? They were told, hey, just kind of stick to 1/3 of the region, and we want to see how the rest of the region is going to develop, right? We really want to see that organic growth, so that way alliances and players don't feel like we're just coming and trying to take everything. They have an opportunity to develop their accounts, develop their territory, and just really play the game, right? Which is something that every player should want to do, right? Just to enjoy it, to see how it is. And so that was our approach coming in. And you can even see as I kind of go through some of the regions, there's still quite a lot of alliances, right? There's no one that's really completely overtaking the region in any of them. And this is something that we created. And I should say, excuse me, laid the foundation out on purpose and with intent to do it in a way where no one feels as though they are limited in any type of capacity. There's always an opportunity there. Again, understanding within those finite resources that not everyone is going to be able to do everything they want to. But when we try to give the most amount of people opportunities, that is something I cannot tell you how incredibly proud I am of the group here. So that would be a good sign, right? Where you're allowing as many people to enjoy the game. And I just want to reiterate this as well. I said this before when we talked about kind of the red flags. Remember, this is just one way to do it. I'm going to give you a couple other ways as well. And it also doesn't mean that these are the only ways to do things. It doesn't mean that what I'm saying is the best or the worst in any regard. These are just what my beliefs are on how you try to build something really good when you have thousands of players, if not tens of thousands of players that are starting out in the kingdom, and you have to try and think about how do you treat as many of them, or how do you consider everyone in as many ways as possible to try and hit some type of healthy, high morale state, right? That's how I view it. So then we get to the second one. Now let's kind of go to a second version of some good signs. Honestly, just seeing a kingdom that allows for multiple alliances to grow within a region where it doesn't feel as though 1-2 alliances are just kind of taking over the entire region, so to speak, or even one alliance to that, and you're kind of seeing how things play out. That to me, I think, is even a lesser version of what I don't know. Well, I don't know if I want to say a lesser, but just a different version than what we're doing. And I still think that's a good. I think that's a good sign. I think another good sign is where if you're not seeing any fighting or any wars that are happening or any really rogue activity, I think that's another great sign. Thankfully, I can say as well to kind of do an attachment. 65 in our situation hasn't, which has been great. We've really enjoyed that. There's hurdles and road bumps here, just like almost every kingdom is going to have to deal with at some point and to some degree. But these are things that I think are really good signs if you're not having a lot of fighting or not a lot of war that's going on, or as I said, any kind of rogue activity where essentially players and alliances are just going around and burning anyone and everyone, and they're just trying to take anything and everything that they can. Those to me are again, red flags. Then I would say another good sign is where if, let's say, you're in a kingdom and there's a lot of alliances, and then you just end up doing a lot of merges, right? Where you have alliances, you have 2-3 alliances that are merging together, you're just condensing. And even if it ends up being a region that starts off with 10, 15, 20 alliances, and eventually it gets condensed to 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it may be, I think that's a good sign too as well. Because what it means is that if you're seeing a lot of merging happening within the Zone 1 regions, the likelihood is that you are condensing in hopes true activity. So that way more players are going to be able to enjoy playing longer and also being in healthy, active alliances where they'll have a lot of players there that can provide helps, they'll participate in events, they'll have good social activity, etc. So again, those to me, I think are good signs, right? When you're in a kingdom that is playing out that way. I think another good sign is if you are able to see, 3 to maybe 5 alliances in Zone 2. I think being able to see maybe 6 to 9 alliances in Zone 3, I think those are good signs, right? The more opportunity you give. Let me point out, not everyone views it that way, right? Some people might tell you, well, you don't need more than 2 to 4 alliances in Zone 3. It doesn't mean that that is a wrong or a bad way of thinking. It's just not something that I believe in limiting it in that way. That's just how I view it. Again, you will often see, and I'm sure multiple people, some may even comment on this video, where they'll say, hey, that's too much in Zone 2, that's too much in Zone 3, right? And in large part, it's just because they haven't done that themselves before in a way where you have a true game plan on how to make that sustainable. Thankfully, I've had the opportunity to do this in a couple kingdoms across a few games now that I've done projects in. And I can tell you that it has worked, and it's just a matter of figuring out how it can work and having a good approach to where people can believe in it, that it will. However, as I said, it's not the only way to do things, right? That's my opinion on it. Others will have theirs, and I think those and everyone's is, just generally to be respected, right? It doesn't mean there's a foolproof way of running a kingdom, but I do think that there are consistent trends that we can look at that kind of lean towards one side of the spectrum and then lean on the other side of the spectrum. So, but those to me, I think are good things, right? Because you have to also think about you're going into season 2, right? In any of these scenarios, whether it be the red flags or the good signs to look out for in a kingdom, I think you're going to end up going into season 2 anyways. So you're going into a merged kingdom with at least 4 to 6 other kingdoms, including your own. And this is something that you also have to factor in, which is how is that going to play out down the road, right? Are you going to go totally just one side of the spectrum where you're running one alliance, one mega alliance in the entire kingdom? And then what are you going to do with that one alliance? You're going to try and just take over one region by yourself? Are you just going to end up maybe doing the for hire approach, right? Where you basically are the whale mega alliance and you're just kind of, you're like mercenaries, right? You're just kind of allying yourself with whomever you want. That's one approach. And then if we go to the extreme other side of the spectrum, right, where you look at kind of the K65 approach of having multiple alliances or many healthy alliances, and we're coming into season 2 maybe with 9 to 12 healthy and active alliances where we can, easily fill out 2 to 3 regions in a season 2. I think it's something you have to kind of, there's kind of some meta strategy there on how many you would actually go into, but I'm just kind of giving an example here of a range, right, where you can fill out those regions and then you have multiple alliances that you can fight on multiple fronts with, and I just believe that just provides more flexibility. But not everyone's going to view it that way, right? You're going to have anyone from the one mega alliance structure all the way to we want as many alliances as possible to go in as a unified kingdom, right? Because at the end of the day, any alliance can join anyone and ally with anyone when season 2 comes around. They don't actually have to stick with your kingdom. So that's obviously an important note to take notice of. I should say, no pun intended. And then obviously you'll get anything in between. So with all of that being said, these are my thoughts. I hope you guys enjoy this video. And remember, usually you're always going to have options, right? For those of you who are watching this, you're like, okay, well, boss, what are my options now if I run into a situation where it's kind of the bad and not really the good? Well, remember, you can always try joining another alliance, whether that be in another region, whether that be in the same region, to see if you can just enjoy your playing experience. Maybe you decide to restart your account and just start out as an individual in another kingdom. Maybe you decide to join a project or a group. You can find those on the official CoD Discord. I'll have links to that in the description down below as well. And hopefully you're able to find something that is really going to work for you. In worst case, maybe migration comes out and I can do a shameless plug and 65 is still rocking and rolling, right? So that's going to be it for me, though. With that in mind, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I would love to hear your thoughts. Let me know, and this is the question I'm going to give to you. I want to hear from you. What are some good examples and or poor examples of kingdoms you've played in that have either made you want to keep playing there because of the way that it was being operated or just how it developed? And tell me a kingdom that you had a poor experience in, and because of certain things they were doing or how things were playing out, you could not wait to get out of there faster. I want to hear those. So let me know in the comments down below, and I think those are going to be some great reads for our other viewers as well. That's it for me. As always, until next time, I will catch you later.